two prime ministers and a president on the stage for you with really the most important subject that faces Europe today, the future of Europe, European disunion, with a question mark at the end of that. I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists, beginning with Prime Minister Fico, our host here, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, as you know. We have Prime Minister Sobotka as well from the Czech Republic. And on the far right, just in the seating order, not politically speaking, we have Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council. Anyone who has read a newspaper over the past few years couldn't avoid the conclusion that Europe might be on the brink of collapse or very close to it. A book that was recently published in the US even carried the title, The End of Europe. And yet, Europe has somehow persevered through all of these myriad crises. In recent months, we've seen populists defeated in Austria, in the Netherlands, and most importantly, in France. So the real question now is, has Europe turned the corner? And I think we would all like to ask our panelists that question, and I will start with a few questions and then invite you, the audience, to come in. So please think about what you would like to ask. I'd also like to welcome our viewers on Facebook Live and on the other live streams that are available today. I would, however, like to start with President Tusk, if I may, who has just come back from the G7 meetings in Sicily. And President Tusk, from your initial comments over the past week after your meetings with US President Trump, you seem to be somewhat skeptical about the relationship, the transatlantic relationship, in the sense that it was clear that there isn't complete agreement in the US on a lot of issues. As we know, there's the climate issue and there are other issues. So if I could just start with you, because the importance of the transatlantic relationship for Europe today and historically, with the US being really one of the drivers of European integration over the past several decades. And I would just like to start with you and get your impressions of the last couple of days and the state of EU-US relations under President Trump.
Thank you. First of all, I think it's maybe the best evidence. I mean, our meeting in Taormina as G7, maybe the best evidence that the rumors about the decline of the West it's a clear an exaggeration. And this is why, in fact, I can't accept this assumption in your first question, your thesis about the end of the Western world or the EU or Europe. It's quite the opposite. In my impression after G7 meetings are more optimistic than I expected, including our new partners around the table. I mean, especially President Trump. Of course, I am not here to be a part of this new culture of permanent leaks, and as you know,
Feel free. We're all friends here.
Sometimes, from time to time, we need also some discrete formats and tete-a-tetes. But what I am absolutely sure after this meeting is that despite some extraordinary form of expressions, behaviors, etc., our partners in G7 are much more responsible than maybe the first impression after the election in the United States. It means that in almost every topic we found a common position, and it was a much easier process than I expected, including our discussions about climate. I know that it was maybe, because in fact the lack of a final positive decision of President Trump about Paris Agreement. It was the most spectacular moment because, as you know, only bad news are news, yeah. But my impression is that after this meeting, our cooperation, and including our transatlantic cooperation between Europe and the United States, can be easier than we expected just after the election in the United States.
Well, that is a very optimistic tone. Just a quick follow-up. Do you think that the United States will pull out of the Paris Accord? That is really the key question here.
Sometimes too optimistic politicians look very naive, and this is what I want to avoid. Yeah, for sure, after our meeting with President Trump in Brussels, and especially after G7, I think that he's ready and he's able and even determined to change this first and rather bad impression after his messages, especially during his campaign. Now, privately and publicly, he sounds much more pro-European and responsible.
Okay. I would like to go to Prime Minister Fico now, and you would like to add something. I would just like to remind the audience that you have translation from Slovak and Czech into English, because the Prime Ministers will be speaking in their native tongues. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Chcem na úvod predovšetkým poďakovať Donaldovi, takisto aj môjmu priateľovi Slavkovi Sobotkovi za prítomnosť tu v Bratislave. GlobSec nadobúda na obrovskom význame a dúfam, že aj prítomnosť pána prezidenta Európskej rady a takisto pána premiéra k tomu iba pridáva. Ja sa domnievam, a škoda, že o tom málo
believe,
hovoríme,
and it's a shame that we do not discuss it in big detail.
že politika,
I think that
pokiaľ ide o vzťahy medzi Spojenými štátmi
when it comes to the relations between the United States and the European Union, the politics creates a huge chance for the European Union.
ja by som vôbec nebol nervózny,
I wouldn't be nervous at all
všeobecným
if I were to generalize
vyjadrení americkej administratívy,
based on the
že
statements of the US administration that Europe should be taking care more of itself.
viac ako 500 miliónov.
We are more than 500 million people in the European Union, and Donald, you remember that when we had the Bratislava summit, we clearly stated that the European Union has to be a more significant player. We cannot always rely on what the US administration will say or whether they will agree with the Russian Federation or China. And therefore, I would really grasp this chance more tightly, and perhaps we should discuss at European Council meetings more frequently how to be committed in various regions where, unfortunately, despite our economic strength, despite our numbers of inhabitants, we do not play the role we could. And the second remark, and maybe this will lead to a discussion, and these meetings are about discussing, when the US president was elected, when Donald Trump was elected, I was asked what caught my attention in his first statements that he made after his election. And I said that I was particularly interested by his statement, and I'll be paraphrasing, that as if the export of democracy has stopped, as it was in the past, exporting democracy to certain countries. And let's be frank, at this occasion, at the meetings of the European Council, some prime ministers and presidents stated that in the past we committed huge mistakes when we thought that just out of the blue we could implant our ideas of democracy, human rights into other countries. And let me give an example of Libya, for example. Libya basically doesn't exist today. It's very easy to quash a regime. It's very easy to remove a dictator. But we didn't have a plan B, and the plan B was missing. And I would be cautious, and I would remind us to be cautious in relation to Syria. We could find a solution, but do we have a plan B for this region? So on the one hand, we might be disturbed by some statements from the other part of the Atlantic, but on the other hand, I see them as a great chance for the European Union and as a great chance to complete change in the behavior of global players such as the United States, Russian Federation, and China. So this is what I wanted to add to this.
Well, some would say, in fact, that Europe also needs a plan B for Europe because the current structure isn't really working out the way many had hoped. I'd like to come to you, Prime Minister Sobotka. How do you see the current state of the European Union? There's a lot of discussion at the moment about moving more towards a multi-speed European Union. You come from a country that is among the most Eurosceptic, at least according to the latest GlobSec trends report, which has just come out, where only 35% of Czechs said they thought that the European Union was a good thing. What does that mean for the future of the European Union, sir?
I would also like to thank for the invitation to GlobSec. I wish you a beautiful Sunday, and perhaps I will also touch upon the issue of the new US president. The climate agreement from Paris is an important thing, but the topic that has been that we've been dealing with in Europe is the migration wave caused by the war in Syria, and I assume that Donald Trump has the opportunity as the new US president to find ways how to promote political agreement in Syria to stop the war, to end the war, and perhaps allow at least some of the people who fled the war to go back to Syria. And this is what we are vitally interested in Europe, because the migration pressure has been stopped by the agreement with Turkey, but even the agreement with Turkey is under pressure. So maybe we should go back to the key priorities that we have in the security area, and to my mind, continuing a political dialogue in Syria, looking for an agreement that would end the war in Syria. This is something that we should expect of the new US president within the role that the United States play and within the dialogue that is planned with Russian President Putin. And if the situation in Europe and about the situation in Europe and the skeptic atmosphere in the Czech Republic, it's a paradoxical situation, because we worked hard to become members of the European Union. We are prospering. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the entire European Union. We use the easy accessibility of the European market, so we were able to use it in economic terms for our economic growth, for the modernization of the country. The European funds helped us significantly. So it's paradoxical to see the skeptical attitude that really is there. Well, we witnessed recently the Eurozone crisis in relation to Greece, which perhaps strengthened the skeptical view of the common or single currency in Europe. And then we saw the migration crisis, and I think that contributed to the skeptical attitudes of our people. And about the future of Europe, we certainly follow the discussion of the multi-speed Europe, but we do see certain risks entailed. As a country without the euro as currency, we would wish that decisions regarding the future of Europe would take place at the table where all 27 member states are represented. We have enhanced cooperation, the possibility of enhanced cooperation, and certainly that would be a natural platform for closer integration. But at the same time, we don't want to see new barriers created negotiate within the European Union, between the Eurozone and other countries, that we would then it would be more difficult for us to move forward to these other integration areas.
Where do you specifically see the disadvantages to your own country if we were to move towards this dual-track Europe with a much more integrated Eurozone? There's nothing stopping the Czech Republic from joining the Eurozone, for example. So what really is the core issue for you? There's a lot of discussion in Poland and other countries about losing money from the structural funds and so forth. There's worry about that. But from your perspective, where do you see really the main disadvantage from a multi-speed Europe?
Tak já myslím, že 3 ze 4 zemí V4
Well, I think 3 out of 4 V4 countries do not use euros, with Slovakia being the only exception. And I may only congratulate to Slovakia how they have managed. But it is quite obvious that even in the Czech Republic the discussions will be more intensive, especially after the French and German elections. We may expect higher pressure from France and Germany to integrate the Eurozone even more, and the adoption of the Euro in the countries where it is not available yet. And however, if we compare our living standard with the Western countries and the countries who are using Euro, we have managed to enhance the situation of the public budget, but we are still lagging behind as far as the wages are concerned. And I dare say we still need some time in order to be able to increase real wages and to reshape the structure of our economies, and in order to focus on the manufacturing and production with higher added values. Should we manage this, we will have also a more positive attitude towards the adoption of the Euro. But I think that for the public sentiment, it is very important how the Euro will cope with the Greek crisis and how the Eurozone will manage. And we will review countries such as Slovakia, Slovenia, Baltic countries, and what is their experience with adopting euros.
What is your view on that? You've obviously been in the Euro for quite some time. Some people would say more pressure should be put on countries like the Czech Republic and Poland to begin the process of joining the Euro. What is your view as a country in Central Europe that has been a member of the currency union?
Hlavne, ak dovolíte, veľmi otvorene to poviem, nesúhlasím s vašim
Well, very openly, I do not agree with you that it's mainly the European Union who needs Plan B. I don't think Europe needs Plan B. What Europe needs is a good, open discussion. Europe needs more respect towards its international interests among its member states. But I think that we are quite able to react to the challenges. Our problem in the European Union is the inability to communicate the positive things. Now, when I'm meeting young people in the age 25 to and 30, and we are trying to explain them the importance of Schengen, they do not understand me. They consider it as granted. But when I am explaining that I had to wait for 3 hours when I had my baggage checked and controlled, for them it is something unimaginable. And when we say that we did not have the opportunity to study anywhere abroad, we could not just sit in the car and find a job in Germany, Austria, Spain or France. And we cannot even sell as positive things that we currently have. For example, the roaming. You will pay the same price anywhere else. And we did not use as a huge campaign that these are the real things that we do for real people. So this is also a problem of our own ability to pass the positive message. But it should be us, the national politicians, who should promote the European Union on the national level. And as far as the two-speed or multiple-speed Europe is concerned, this is becoming a tragic comedy. We are speaking about the second speed, third speed, and soon there will be fourth speed. But this is quite normal. We do have countries that have euro and those who don't. And I am one of the prime ministers of those countries that have euros. And I wish that every single decision that we adopt in the Eurozone would be done in cooperation with the countries that do not have euros, because it is up to them to decide when they enter Eurozone. On the other hand, I fully expect from those countries who do not have euros to respect the convergence of those countries who do have euros. I will have today a phone call with the new French president, and I will ask him about these things. It seems that there is a new French-German integration engine under construction, and I agree with them. We cannot have one currency when one country has a balanced budget, the other one has a deficit budget. So those countries who are not in the Eurozone and have significantly better results than the countries of Eurozone, for example, Poland or Czech Republic, these countries could serve an example should they be in the Eurozone. And this is our official position. If there is a new integration engine of closer convergence of the Eurozone, not only we want to be part of a discussion, we want to be on that train, we want to be in the core. If the group around the euro will be more convergent, we want to be part of it. However, we may not allow this topic to be divisive for the European Union as a whole. We want to be part of it, we want to participate on it, but we may not allow it to be divisive.
How do you avoid what Prime Minister Fico has described as a tragic comedy, this discussion about a multi-speed Europe, from becoming divisive, because it is by its nature divisive? And if I think to the reactions from your own country, from Poland, including here over the past couple of days, with Foreign Minister Waszczykowski repeating that it would be a disaster for the EU if this multi-speed idea were to gain currency. How do you avoid that from happening? Because there already is a lot of discussion, as you described, Prime Minister, about it. There's the white paper from the Commission and so forth. There are all kinds of ideas floating around. None of them are particularly new. These are sort of the same ideas get recycled in new packaging. And they are very divisive, which is why they often get kicked into the long grass and nobody talks about them until there's a new crisis. But what's the way forward here?
First of all, I think that there's no reason to panic, you know, and we shouldn't panic because, first of all, I'm absolutely sure that you remember the very interesting announcement of Marie Le Pen. It was just 2 days ago or 3 days ago, that the biggest mistake in her campaign was the anti-European rhetoric and this suggestion that France should withdraw from the Eurozone. In this part of Europe, we have sometimes a little bit skeptical public opinion towards Europe, like in Czech Republic, and very pro-European government at the same time. In Poland and in Hungary, but okay, let's talk about Poland. We have a Eurosceptical...
Feel free to talk about Hungary.
Yeah, Eurosceptical government, and with clearly anti-European rhetoric from time to time, and very, very pro-European public opinion. Almost 80% of Poles are happy of the fact that Poland is the member of the European Union. Nothing is simple in this context. There is no black and white, political and social landscape. But I think that we should also clarify what we mean when we talk about two or multi-speeds in Europe.
Well, take the Macron. Take the Macron ideas, for example, where he's talking about a Eurozone parliament, finance minister, and so forth, and what some people see as basically a parallel structure to the EU.
In fact, it's nothing new and nothing extravagant to talk about specific and different political or legal formats in the EU. First of all, a group of enhanced cooperation are foreseen by treaty, as you know, and we have maybe the most spectacular examples of this enhanced cooperation is Eurozone or Schengen, and I think it's quite natural in this kind of very complex political system like the EU that you have differences, different level of integration, and also we have also the different political clubs. My experience also as the previous Polish Prime Minister is that they were and they are very useful in the process of when we are looking for a compromise. Like political clubs, I mean this kind of formats like Visegrad Group, Weimar, Benelux, Nordic countries, etc., etc. In fact, what is the real threat today? It's not a two or multi-speeds or different level of integration. This is our reality. It will be our reality. It was always our political reality in the EU. The real threat is not a different speed. The real threat is a different destination or different direction. It means that what is, for me, the biggest problem today in Europe is that we have some political parties, some governments, politicians, media, etc., etc., who are questioning today the essence of the EU, the essence of Europe. Essence means liberal democracy, freedom, tolerance, freedom of speech, this conviction that what we need today is to re-establish a solidarity among other countries with a liberal democracy like the United States, Japan, G7, or including also Australia, South Korea, New Zealand, because the real possible and the most brutal conflict will be between this traditional free world and new powers which intend, it was absolutely clear, I've heard it in Munich, it was, if I remember well, Lavrov intervention in Munich. I can feel this during our discussions with our Chinese partners, that what they intend is, in fact, to establish a new so-called post-West order.
Exactly.
And I think this is the real challenge,
and
not the differences between or among member states in the EU.
But this discussion between the member states is often wind in the sails of the parties that you're talking about, who take a very Eurosceptic view. So is it really a solution to just sort of, continue the status quo and to continue talking? The Europeans are very good at talking about the future, but when it really comes down to brass tacks, it gets much more difficult. Are we at 5 minutes to midnight, as some people are suggesting, that if something fundamentally doesn't change, that it is in danger of...
Yeah, but just one remark, the disputes about the future of liberal democracy, our values, principles, this is not a dispute between a group of member states against the other group of member states. It's a permanent and very deep divisions and disputes and arguments among all European societies. We have the same problem also in a global context, for example, to the United States. It means that this is for me a civilizational challenge, not only a part of our permanent negotiations in Europe. And as a historian, sorry, maybe it will be my last remark, but this is in fact, our political heritage, this permanent process of disputes, compromise, and, for example, you remember Greece versus Persia during the First and Second Persian War. And if you remember who won the war? It was Greece, without effective executive power, with constantly disputes and debates between the city-states, polis. And this very complex, constantly arguing organization of Greek polis, they confront with a centralized, well-organized, in fact, authoritarian power as Persia was there. But Greece won the confrontation. It means that for me, the main question today is not the question, how can we reorganize the traditional European model of very complex, sophisticated checks and balances political system. It's the real problem and the real challenge is how we can protect this very unique model. It's not as fast as a political model fast in making decision process, for sure, like in Russia or Turkey or in other, or in China. But I'm absolutely sure that this is one of the reasons why Europe is still the best place in the world. This unique system of limitations for every executive power, this permanent process of debate, this desire to find every single day compromise among member states. For me, this is not our disadvantage. This is maybe the biggest and the best part of our political reality.
I would like to come to the audience in just a moment, so prepare your questions. I just had one more question for the prime ministers. There is a lot of hope now in some quarters that Germany and France in particular, after the German election, will take Europe forward, that they will pursue a grand reform plan. When people, I find, in Central and Eastern Europe hear this, they're not always happy about it. Is it really possible in an EU of 27 for Germany and France to act as the motor as they have historically? Maybe Prime Minister Fico, if you want to start with that.
Ja som už pomenoval Nemecko a Francúzsko.
I already said that Germany and France may be the new engine of integration, mainly in relation to the Eurozone. I wasn't thinking about some principal changes in the functioning of the European Union. And I have to agree with what Donald said. We shouldn't worry about proposals that appear on a daily basis. Now we receive the proposal to have a Minister of Finance, or perhaps there should be new institutes which have not existed in the European Union before. However, I would consider it wrong if the Union started to only focus on itself, institutions, functions, and disputes which country will get which functions. Those are prestigious posts in the European Union, and I'm one of those prime ministers who are not excited about the idea to reopen the fundamental treaties when we talk about the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, for example. And I think the fundamental treaties create sufficient room to move forward. For example, the system of the so-called enhanced cooperation, that's a mechanism which can give a chance to some countries to move forward in some areas and other countries in these very areas. And one more remark, if I may. I'd like to say that sometimes it is about a methodology we apply to our work, and it's good that we discussed this methodology at the summit in Bratislava and then again. And we arrive at the first results. I would like to appreciate Donald's approach at the last summit when we gave clear political guidelines how to behave in the negotiations with the United Kingdom. This document was very well prepared and we adopted it in 5 minutes. After 5 minutes of negotiations, we were able to adopt it, and then we had a general political discussion. We have to learn, and we do it in the Visegrad 4 group, and perhaps the Visegrad group could be a good example. Let's not table things that divide us. It's clear that when the Commission comes with a proposal today that every country should pay 300,000 euros for any migrant they do not receive, or perhaps that there should be new obligatory quota. It's as if you throw a stone among birds. It's impossible to agree. V4 functions on the principle that this is where we can agree, so let's agree, and if we cannot agree, we work on the lower level and we approach the high level. I'm not as skeptical. You cannot even imagine what it means when 28 heads of state and government meet without having anything agreed, and perhaps we have 8-9 hours of deliberations, and all of a sudden in the morning at 3 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. Magically, the heads of state and government agree. 28 countries, different interests, national interests, but in the name of the European Union, at the end of the day, they can arrive at a conclusion, at an agreement. So there are obviously things we could improve, but I wouldn't go against the principles of the European Union. I wouldn't touch the foundations on which the European Union is based. And even though we are a small country, not a decisive country, we will be very cooperative. We want to be inside, we want to have a say, but we also want to bring the European standards into that.
What is your view of this? Do you also think that there might be a need for cosmetic changes, maybe not the kind of deep reforms that we're hearing discussed in Paris and Berlin these days?
Our government has stated that we are against opening the fundamental treaties, the basic treaties. We should focus on steps that will be comprehensible to our people and steps that will be useful for the European Union and member states. I think strengthening our security is one of the priorities, protecting the external borders, fighting terrorism, stabilizing regions in the neighborhood of the European Union. But obviously there are economic goals, promoting economic growth, promoting investment in Europe, promoting technological change so that Europe is a competitive unit also in future. So I'm happy that we do not go through long, winding deliberations regarding fundamental treaties. Nobody would be able to understand apart from a few experts. But I'm very happy that the Rome conclusions and Bratislava and Malta conclusions, the last summits of the European Council, say that we are addressing specific comprehensible issues that have practical solutions and issues that we encounter in our daily life. You mentioned that we just discuss here without specific results, but the agreement with Turkey is a specific result that eased the migration pressure. We have prepared a series of measures helping us to fight terrorism, for example, in the exchange of information or gathering information, for example, about passengers in air transport in Europe. We can also comment who is entering the simplified regime in Europe. So for the last 2-3 years, we have encountered many security crises and we've dealt with them. And about the multi-speed Europe, it seems to be not a great problem, but if you look at the practical space that we have in Europe, then certainly one of the lines is Schengen, then another would be Eurozone, and then we have, for example, Romania and Bulgaria, who apparently are frozen outside of Schengen, and nothing is moving. thing. And if we take a look at how to get to the faster lane, for example, in Schengen, this leads to the worries the Czech Republic has regarding the multi-speed Europe. Yes, if there is a multi-speed Europe, then we should have clear, transparent rules for everybody so that all member states out of the 27, if they so decide, could join the faster lane. And that relates to Schengen, that relates to the Eurozone, and that relates to structures that the Eurozone wishes to create. So a healthy measure of skepticism is right, I think, and about the Franco-German engine or integration engine, I think this will sort of increase the dynamism in Europe. But on the other hand, I would be very happy if the discussion would not lead to disrupting the single market. The Czechs are a very practical nation, and we appreciate the fact that we have 4 basic freedoms in the European Union. We have the single market, and we would be very unhappy if this Franco-German discussion would lead to introducing some protectionist measures, non-tariff barriers to trade within individual member states. That wouldn't be good.
I would like to go to the audience now. There was a question in the back there, so you lead.
Thank you, Excellencies. Europe enjoyed the value that we all could be proud of, and they were wonderful matter of democracy. But now these values are challenged because different individual or certain European states are having definitions of terrorism and security on their own, and that does not share with all the other members. And that the way the policy they have towards money laundering, financing, sponsoring terrorism in certain states or elements. So what measures do you take, or what kind of assurance do you give to the entire world, especially to your own citizens, that you would not support, or you would give the assurance to the minority, especially the Muslim minorities in Europe, that they would not be stereotyped, they would not be treated differently as part of your own citizens, a part of your own countries. So this is a new Europe. You need to be clear about messaging, because mixed messages are given by the leadership.
What's actually the question you'd like to ask?
What kind of assurance and what measures EU is taking, in fact, to have a clear narrative for all the European member states, and at the same time assurance for the Muslim communities in Europe?
I think we get. I would like to collect a couple of questions because time is short. We've got another one right here.
Okay, thank you, Giray Sadık, Associate Professor. My question is to
and just remember to keep the questions
President
short, please.
Tusk. Exactly. What does the EU performance in refugee crisis tell us about the EU in terms of humanitarian values and in terms of EU as a global actor? And how can an organization claim global credibility unless it practices what it preaches when it comes to humanitarian values? Thank you.
Okay, maybe then we've got one here.
John Roberts from Me Things. First of all, my thanks to the Prime Ministers of Slovakia and Czech Republic for the work of their pilots during World War II.
Microphone. You've got to hold the.
And to Poland.
I don't think the microphone's switched on, actually.
Is it not working? Okay, it's working. My thanks to the Prime Ministers for the work of their pilots in World War II.
Okay.
To the Polish Army Division who protected my country, Scotland. And a quick question to Mr. Tusk. Okay. And a quick question to Mr. Tusk. In the event of Brexit, how long do you think it might take for an independent Scotland to rejoin a Europe it doesn't wish to leave?
Okay, maybe we start with those three. Do you want to start, Prime Minister Fico, on the security question?
Ak dovolíte, aby som sa sústredil na...
If I may, I would focus on the first question
ktorá sa dotýka
that touched upon the guarantees or safeguards which the European Union as a whole should give to its citizens, and safeguards it should give to minorities in relation to fighting terrorism. This is how I understood the essence of the question.
Pán kolega, ja som zastupoval Slovenskú
I
republiku
represented the Slovak Republic
8 rokov na Európskom súde pre
at
ľudské
the European
práva
Court of Human Rights
v
for 8
Štrasburgu.
years in Strasbourg.
A bol som právnym zástupcom
And I was
vlády
the
Slovenskej
legal
republiky.
representative of the government of the Slovak
A chcel
Republic.
by som aj tu možno
And
postaviť
perhaps
jednoduchú otázku.
I would ask a simple question here as well.
Máme sa správať
Shall we
k zlodejovi bicykla
behave to a thief who steals a
Rovnako
bicycle in the same manner
ako k človeku, ktorý
as to someone who is
zorganizoval
organizing
bombový útok
a
a
bomb
zabil
attack
50
and killed
ľudí?
50 people?
A rovnako o ňom vieme, že
And
tento
we
človek,
know that
má
this
informácie,
person
ktoré môžu
has
viesť
information
k
that may lead
likvidácii
to
sietí ďalších útočníkov. Toto je otázka,
questioning
na ktorú
the
sme si doteraz
networks
nedali
of other
odpoveď
attackers.
na
This is a
európskej
question
úrovni.
which we have not yet answered at the
Mám
European
pocit, že
level.
riešime skôr
And I think that
individuálne,
we are dealing with it
čo potom vyvoláva
more
aj
individually,
veľkú
and
mieru
that leads to a
hnutí
high degree of
jednotlivých
perhaps
členských štátov.
tensions in individual member states.
Odpovedal by som na vašu otázku,
I
že
would
našou
reply to your question that our first task today
zabezpečiť
is
podstatne intenzívnejšiu
to
spoluprácu pri výmene
ensure a
informácií.
more intensive cooperation in exchanging information.
S pánom,
Together
premiérom
with the
Českej
Prime Minister
televízie
Sobotka,
a
we
povedal,
were
že
on TV
to je
recently,
základ
and he
proti
said that this is the
terorizmu.
foundation of fighting terrorism.
A záruky, ktoré dávame
And the
tak občanom
safeguards that we
Európskej
give
únie,
to
ako aj minoritám,
EU citizens and to
sa
minorities
zakladajú z
are
platných
based
právnych
on
predpisov,
the
ktoré v jednotlivých krajinách máme. Tu by som dnes
applicable
nehľadal nič
legislation
iné,
that we
len
have in the member
odpovedal
states today.
na
I
vašu
wouldn't look for anything
otázku
else. I'm just replying to
protiotázkou,
your question
či
with a
nemáme
counter
v boji
question.
proti terorizmu zájsť v niektorých oblastiach
Shouldn't
aj
we
trochu
perhaps go a bit further in fighting terrorism in some
Čo je
areas?
dôležité? Mať dobrý pocit,
What is
že
important?
ma
To have a good feeling
nevyzujú na
that I wouldn't have to
alebo že ma
take my
neprinútia
shoes
dať
off
si
at
dole
the
pasok.
airport, or perhaps that I wouldn't have to take my belt
A
off at
potom
the
na druhej
airport,
strane
and then on the
mať
other
nepríjemný
hand
pocit, keď,
have the
vďaka
unpleasant
takýmto
feeling that
opatreniam
if
niekto vymyslí lietadlo do vzduchu.
despite these measures, someone will blow up an airplane. So the line between human rights and fighting terrorism is somewhere else than between human rights and the classic fight against crime. And perhaps we should discuss this topic in more detail. And then another topic. You, sir, asked the question of humanitarian approach of the European Union to migrants, a humane approach. And of course, we all are aware that these people are in a very, very difficult situation and they need our help. And we are the rich part of the world, if I were to talk about the European Union as a whole. But above that is something else, and don't be angry with me, but above the humane approach on the part of the EU towards these people, for me, safety of the European citizens is first, safety and security of EU citizens. And in Slovakia, I'm discussing about Slovak citizens. In the case of European Union, I mean European citizens. What happened in Manchester is incomprehensible, and it will perhaps lead us to other discussions on the on European level. And I do believe that we'll not discuss whether we need a new Minister of Finance or whether we should open up the treaties, but we'll discuss how to calm down the European public so that they feel safe when it comes to measures in fighting terrorism.
It's definitely going to be an issue at the European level. President Tusk, if you'd like to address the question from the Scottish gentleman, and if you could keep your answer as short as possible, maybe we can then take another couple of questions, if you want to think about what your questions are in the next couple of minutes. Sir?
Yeah, just Europe is still the most open continent or the most open place in the world for refugees and migrants. And we have thousands and thousands of people, organizations, institutions, deeply engaged in humanitarian assistance. There's no reason to complain when it comes to this very context of migration crisis. Europe is, of course, not a perfect one, but still the best example in the world. Also when it comes to this readiness to sacrifice something, not only money, but also our time, emotions, and it's, you know, during our discussions, for example, with our global partners about migration, and I could feel some kind of fatigue or that they are tired. I mean, for example, the United States, Canada, even Japan, on the discussions about migration. But as you know well, when it comes to Canada, we are talking about 20,000 refugees and migrants. I mean, during the migration crisis. Japan, close to 0. Europe, more than 1.5 million. This is why I think that, of course, we have different approaches. We have a different rhetorics in Europe about migration and different emotions. But generally speaking, the EU as a group of states and Europe as a whole continent, it's still the most friendly, the most open place for migrants and refugees. When it comes to Muslims minority and this very visible risk that some political elites, maybe it's the worst word, the worst definition, elites, but some political groups, and they are ready to claim that, in fact, Islam is a synonym of terrorism. Of course, we can't agree with this kind of simplification. On the other hand, we should understand also emotions, especially after such an event like Manchester or other attacks in Europe. My advice is, or my suggestion is that we have to start but a genuine discussion with Muslim minorities representatives. How can we cooperate together to exclude Islamic radicals from our societies? Because I think it's not enough today to show only our, Muslim solidarity after attacks. Without deep engagement from Muslim communities in our countries, who have no chance to eliminate this radical part of the Islam world. If we want not only to discuss but to act something very substantive when it comes to de-radicalization, we need a real engagement from Muslims in Europe. Without this, we will be as vulnerable, as helpless as today. And this is my appeal. And if we want to stop this very dangerous evolution when it comes to ideas and emotions in Europe, if we want to stop our radicals, Christians, so we need Muslims engagement, this positive engagement in our common fight against radicalism, extremism, and
I think we should,
of course, terrorism.
We should leave that subject there. Thank you very much. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I had one last question.
But what about Scotland?
I thought that you were
don't leave them alone.
You were skillfully dodging that question. I thought, but if you want to address it quickly, please.
No,
Scotland,
it was a
yes,
job.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm not ready.
Okay. I just had a very quick question for the panel before we end. The subject is European disunion, the future of Europe, and my question would be, do you think that we will see some kind of reform of the EU over the next couple of years, some further integration, some steps to repair the sort of myriad of problems? And I would like to begin with Prime Minister Sobotka.
I hope that we are already seeing the changes, so that we can influence it, we can regard security, foreign policy, economic policy, and I hope that Europe will stay open for countries which meet the criteria to join the European Union. And I think that in the Balkans this will be quite important for the stability of the region. So it's not about big plans or big starts, but we've already started, and we have important political goals that we agreed upon in Rome when we commemorated the anniversary of the Treaties of Rome. And now we should not just withdraw into bureaucratic approaches, and we should try to accomplish things speedily.
It's appropriate that the final word go to our host, Prime Minister Fico. You have the floor.
Odpoveď na vašu otázku je áno, budeme svedkami.
The reply is yes, we will witness certain changes. Let me just express my conviction that those changes will be pragmatic, rational, and I was very pleased when Donald was elected for the first time as a top representative of the European Union, and when he managed to win again, even though maybe it wasn't as simple as the first time, and I'm saying that because countries such as the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, but I have to include Hungary when we talk about the Visegrad Group. These countries underwent a unique transformation process. And in other countries, it took much longer. And sometimes it seems to me, and excuse us for saying these things, that perhaps we have a healthier common sense when we look at things. We are more pragmatic. And I believe that after Donald's leadership, the pragmatism will win, and that we will not witness just empty words, and that we will witness solutions that will help everybody. It's not only about people being more satisfied in the European Union. I see a lot of nervousness among young people, and it's also supported by the media, by the Eurosceptics, and therefore I would like to thank the organizers of this exceptional event, that they also give room to these topics. And on the part of the Slovak government, let me assure you of our support for organizing the event next year. And if you manage to implement all the changes that you've planned, you'll still have our support. Thank you very much.
Well, let's... Since we're talking about the organizers, let's bring the president of GlobSec to the stage, Robert Vash.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister Fico, for your excellent support. This was the most powerful panel we ever had at GlobSec. So I know you have a very busy schedule, so you'll probably have to leave. But in the meantime, let me thank you and clap hands for the very interesting panel you had.
Thank you.
We are very great that also the president of the Donald Tusk has joined us for the second time as well. Thank you very much. While they are leaving, I will be saying just a few words at the end of GlobSec, just to summarize the 3 days we had. We are coming to the end of GlobSec conference, and I think it was a watershed in many respects. Let me share with you some facts and figures. They show clearly that a lot of people followed us not only in this room, but followed us closely all over Europe and the world. Let me give you some statistics. We are pleased to welcome here in this hotel not only 1,300 guests from 70 countries, 150 speakers. We managed to facilitate meetings that were 135. We had 130 interviews and welcomed more than 210 journalists. But when it comes to the outreach outside of this room, we had 470,000 impressions on Facebook. The reach of unique users who have seen our content has been 3,050,000, and we had 7,700,000 impressions on Twitter. I think it is a tremendous following of our debates here. We were live on MSNBC, AP, and the international coverage was really huge. Thank you for all the journalists who were covering this. But 2017 was very special for us at GlobSec. This year we introduced for the first time the second stage where we were discussing the multiple futures that were predicted and debated. And I think it was a fascinating to follow these discussions, and we will definitely continue with that in the future in the upcoming conferences. But also it was for the first time that the GlobSec Policy Institute, with its new management and the international team led by Jakub Wiśniewski, played such a crucial role in providing the background research for our deliberations. The initiatives of the Institute were part of the solution that were being proposed and considered. And I think that is of tremendous success. But I want to thank to several people without whom GlobSec would not be possible. And first of all, let me thank to Rastislav Káčer, whose wisdom and common sense have guided me, but also the GlobSec team throughout the years. Thank you, Rastislav, for that. I would like to thank also to Minister Lajčák and to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovakia for a huge moral and material support. It was Minister Lajčák and Deputy Minister Korčok who have been helping us every single day in the preparation. So thank you, Ivan, for that. I cannot forget our corporate partners, captains of industries that are showing us the way to progress and prosperity. I will not tell everybody of those because we mentioned everybody during the course of these meetings, but without their support, GlobSec would not be possible. Thank you very much for all the corporate partners. I also want to thank to our International Advisory Board for their wisdom and counsel, but among them, let me especially thank to two special individuals who were with us for a long time and who are our long-standing friends. First of all, it's General John Allen, and Secretary Michael Chertoff, who are leading our international initiatives. Thank you. Let me also thank to the police who kept us safe in this place, and to the hotel staff for the extraordinary service they've made during these 3 days. But last but not least, let me mention the great work done by the GlobSec team with the leadership of Milan Solar and Michal Číž. The smooth functioning of the conference was due to the quiet work behind the shades of dozens of individuals and interns who work for GlobSec. They've been really working hard, not only during these 3 days, but for weeks and months for preparations for these 3 days. And it is a huge, huge thanks for them and for their dedication that they prepared this conference. If I have one personal takeaway from the conference, it is the conviction that democracy, with all its downsides, has one amazing quality. It is able to constantly reinvent itself, bring new ideas, and adapt to the changing circumstances. And we can get ahead of the events. We need to adapt to the future, but also make it the way we like it. And it is among us, about this community which is here. So let me leave you with this thought, and I wish you a safe and a happy journey back home, and see you next year at the GlobSec. Thank you very much.
conclude, oh, come on. I told you I'm going to do this. To conclude conclusions, and confirm conspiracies in the world. So nothing is by an accident. By an accident, this day it's also Robert's 34th birthday. So happy birthday to you.
We don't have to choose between trade and progress.